What is going on, everybody? Welcome to From Screen to Shelf podcast. This is going to be a little bit of a different thing we're doing today. We're doing a capsule review. So this is the first of those, first of many. But we're going to be talking about our experiences with Exorcist Believer. We spoke about it in our inaugural episode when we talked about the legacy of the Exorcist and what we were hoping to see and look forward to with this new film. Now we've all gotten the chance to see it. Gabe and Chase, I think you guys saw it Thursday, I believe,
Mhm.
Thursday night. I got the
Yep.
chance to see it Friday. We've all had a couple days to digest everything. So without further ado, I think we're just going to get right into it. Gabe, I know you were looking forward to this the most. I'd like you to kind of kick it off here and give us your thoughts
Well,
fresh
yes.
out of the fire.
So, I mean, it's you guys know Exorcist is probably one of my top five favorite films of all time. I adore that film. Watch it all the time. It's a masterpiece in my opinion. I'm actually going to surprise you guys a little bit. I think that a lot of the critics and a lot of the Metacritic ratings are actually wrong. I think people got this wrong. I mean, I'm seeing that it got like 20 something percent and 39% on Metacritic. I think it needs to be lower than that. Um, I don't think that I don't think we're doing due justice here. I think it needs to be lower than that. This movie was an utter disappointment. And coming from someone who's absolutely passionate about The Exorcist, I think that they just got the tone, the atmosphere, everything wrong with this film. I think this film was one that was supposed to show a lot of restraint. It was supposed to set up, a very claustrophobic, isolated atmosphere where you're pretty much just stuck with this family and, going through this horrific thing. And I think that they did the opposite. I think that they branched it out, just did more special effects, bringing more people into the plot that there needed to be, bringing in legacy characters. Like it just turned into a huge convoluted mess. And I think that that's the biggest issue that David Gordon Green had in making this movie. I think that, and with the writer, I think the writer's name was Peter Sattler. I think he co-wrote it with David Gordon Green. They didn't show any restraint. They just went full out and did more, and you didn't get more from it. You just kind of left asking yourself, what the hell just happened? Um, and I know we're going to get into spoilers here in a little bit. All this right now is just kind of non-spoiler, just first impressions. But I think that the movie wasn't scary. I didn't feel like there was any drama in it. It just really left me discouraged leaving the cinema. And I think it was because I wrote in my Letterboxd review over the weekend. It's just that they did so much for this movie that didn't need to be done. I think we had talked about it before. I had brought up Eggers the Witch to you guys. I think the Witch, ironically enough, it's not The Exorcist, right? It has nothing to do with this IP, but I think it encapsulated kind of what The Exorcist was. You know what I mean? It was kind of like this slow build, kind of, isolated, claustrophobic, scary, psychological, ideological, analysis. And you don't get that with this movie. This is like just you're watching just a regular possession movie, and I think that that's super disheartening, especially when you're slapping the label The Exorcist on it. It's just you don't get any of that. You don't get any elements of what made William Friedkin's 1973 a classic. And we'll delve into spoilers here in a little bit. The only thing I have to say that's positive, I think the two girls that played the victims of the possession, I think they did a great job. They were creepy. They did the best they could with what they were given to work with. And I'm sure that you guys are going to reiterate this. Leslie Odom Jr., I think he did a solid job as well. But I mean, they weren't given enough material to work with, and I think that's what made it such a disappointment. So I mean that's my take. I think people have it wrong. I think it's worse than what Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic are saying. I think it's I'm just super bummed out. And I told Chase because we saw it opening night. I told him, I was like, look, I'm used to it. Exorcist prequels and sequels at this point just never, have lived up to the original, which is fine. And I didn't expect this to either. I think we walked into this movie just wanting it to be a solid experience, just something decent that was, disturbing that we can kind of reflect on and say that was a good little horror flick. I didn't expect it to reach, the levels of of Friedkin's classic, but it didn't give us that. So super bummed out with this one, guys. The discouragement has slowly built over time. I wasn't discouraged at first, but now I am, and it hurts. I don't know, what do you think, Chase? I know you saw it around the same time I did.
Yeah, I think you and I were like beat for beat, maybe like few minutes behind
We
or ahead of
texted
each
each
other.
other like right before it started. Yeah, we're like,
Yeah.
let's do it. Send positive vibes to the universe.
Yeah. And yeah, because we'll go into more spoiler territory here soon. Um, the geez, the scariest part of that movie was the fact that I sat down and wasted my time to watch it. The best part of the movie was when the credits rolled because that was the happiest moment. That was the most joy I felt was because I could get up and leave. And very rarely do I feel that way. Like I give overwhelming 4.5, even 5-star reviews on Letterboxd to a lot of things that people are like, what? Like I find enjoyment out of things that people find bad and stuff, and especially whenever people like, I know we avoided the reviews, and I didn't even go to that early screening that I was offered to go to with that fan club. But the biggest thing is once I saw those going in, I couldn't avoid them. I was like, let me see if I can just read some spoiler free ones. And there were some that were like in the 5, 6 out of 10 category and stuff like that. I was like, okay, generally those are the movies I enjoy the most. When they're rated about 5 or 6, the mediocre to like decent, like we wanted at the least, right? So I kind of took it as a little bit of a challenge to take a little bit more away. But as you said, Leslie Odom, like, could it have even he been better? Yes, but as an actor, he went balls to the wall with everything that he could on that script. I think, and I feel like it is kind of appropriate after, I've already said like I like ends the most out of the trilogy because I think it took a lot of different strides and stuff like that. But I can understand why people don't like that. Same thing with Kills. I can understand why people don't like that. I'm not the biggest fan of 2018, which is pretty much the consensus that's one of the better Halloween sequels out of a majority of them. People were stoked. People have their taste and flavors, and so people were really bought into David Gordon Green, the writers, the whole team and crew, which pretty much is copy and pasted onto the Exorcist Believer.
Mhm.
Did they write this on a napkin at a luncheon or something like that? And then just pass it around, scribble on it and stuff because the pacing was awful. It was a very slow burn, and then it just goes, 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 stops, goes, stops, and wants you to care. Um, like even the biggest aspect, whenever it comes to the original, which we've said that even in our inaugural episode and the whole 9 yards, whenever it comes to what we expected, we didn't go in there saying this better be just as good. Like if you're calling it a direct sequel,
Yeah.
this has to be a 9 out of 10, or else I'm gonna walk out and trash this movie. We're
Hmm.
reasonable humans on this podcast. I feel like a solid, decent experience, a solid story. Even if it was just something we felt like, even if this could have been better, but set up something that's worth being a trilogy. That's not what happened, though. This did not feel like it sets anything up but just itself for failure. And for me to go in on a movie like this, like the way that it shoehorns in is only with one line, and we'll go in more on spoilers. There's one line in there that sets up the actual trilogy, and I like as good as the actresses, the child actors were. Their name keeps escaping me. I apologize, but whenever as good as they were with the screen time that they were given, they were not given enough screen time for me to care about what happens to them.
Yeah.
I wasn't even given enough to buy into how the possession started. There was not enough for me to buy into that. It just felt like everything's like here, and that'll be my little soap opera. I'll pass it off over to you, Will, and then we'll go into spoilers. And I know we pretty much all have the same takes in regards to what the issues were.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to piggyback off of what some of the stuff that you guys have mentioned already. The first thing, I do want to get some positives out there. Leslie Odom Jr., fantastic actor. Really love some of the stuff he's done. Knives Out, for one. If anybody
Hmm.
hasn't seen that yet, go and check that movie out because he really is he's a fantastic talent. And as Gabe and Chase have both said, I just felt that he carries the cross as best as he can. Through this very painstaking mess of a movie. But other than that, I mean, there's not really anything that I felt stuck out to me. Nothing about it was redeeming in any way, shape, or form. I liked the beginning. I felt they opened it up on a decent note. And some of the buildup to the introduction of Ellen Burstyn's character was well done in aspects, in certain aspects. But it was lacking atmosphere. It lacked the atmosphere of the original. The pacing was Chase. You mentioned it. It was just kind of all over the place. It's like they didn't know. It's like they started trying to make one movie, and then suddenly they tried to make something else, and it just doesn't go together. And I want to touch on what Gabe said about opening this movie up. We talked about this in the first episode. You know, one of the things that made the original film so scary was it was a contained story. It was a contained, experience that those characters were having inside that house with the girl that was possessed. You know, we saw what it did to her. We saw how it affected the people close to her. You know, especially Chris McNeil. You know, Reagan's mother, Ellen Burstyn's character. And I felt that with this film, they tried to do too much in too little time. And even though this film is 2 hours, it's not that much shorter than the original. There's
Mhm.
too much going on, and there's too many characters and too many things happening for them to really establish anything meaningful. And so, because of that, you don't really have time to get to really know any of these characters because you're just like, okay, wait a minute. Now they're introducing this person. Then I got this person over here. There's, as a viewer, there's just too much going on to keep track of. And everything feels convoluted and thrown together. And it's almost like, they throw all this stuff at you and then they realize, like, oh, crap, okay, we got to try to tie all this in and make all this
Mhm.
work, for the possession scene. And it just doesn't. They've kind of, the best way I can describe it is they've opened this can of worms. And then for the last act of the movie, they're trying to put all the worms back in the can and it just doesn't work.
Mhm.
It doesn't work. There's no tension. There's some jump scares which pissed me the hell off, and they didn't even scare me. They didn't get me because I could predict them coming. But an Exorcist movie is not about jump scares.
Absolutely.
You don't
Agreed.
do that, and we're all sick and tired of jump scares. Okay, I speak for a lot of people when I say we're just tired of fucking jump scares,
Mhm.
and I just feel like this isn't the type of movie that you need to include those in. It's just the fact that they utilize those plays into what I was saying in the initial podcast because one of my concerns was whether or not Blumhouse was the kind of studio to push this story forward into the 21st century, right? In
Yeah.
2023. I was worried that regardless of what I know and regardless of the talent that David Gordon Green has as a director, because as I've said, he has made some fantastic movies. I love
Mhm.
Pineapple Express. I mean, that's a completely different lane for him in terms of the genre and type of story, but I really like George Washington. I know that he has it in him, to
Mhm.
tell a good story and to direct a good movie. But I'm curious and I question how much studio interference there was with this movie because some of the things that I saw on screen during this movie were immediately came to mind. I said, no, somebody from the studio. It has corporate touches all over it.
Yeah.
And it's just
Commercial
it just
exorcism, pretty much.
yeah, yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. It was, and by those standards, it was tame. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but we'll talk about specific things in a bit. But that's really it for me. I liked
Mhm.
Leslie Odom Jr. He did the best that he could. I liked hearing the original theme kind of peppered in there. That gave you the nostalgia that we felt with Halloween. But yeah, for a first entry in a supposed, trilogy, I it just fell flat for me,
Yeah.
all around. So
And just to, before we get into spoilers, just to piggyback what you said too, is that there's so many characters, and the ones you should be caring about are Leslie Odom Jr.'s character and the girls. You know
mhm.
what I mean? And you kind of, I mean, you kind of care for Leslie Odom Jr. I think they show a lot of like his struggle and what he's going through. But other than that, I thought everyone else was annoying. You know what I mean? The parents for the other girl were obnoxious. The nurse was kind of cringy in a way, kind of like how she just kind of enters herself into the plot. I a lot of these characters were just really obnoxious, and I didn't care for them. Like I think that's the thing that makes The Exorcist a staple is there were a few characters in the original Exorcist. You have the mom, you have Reagan, you have Karis, you Marin, but they all kind of have their own like individual arcs that they're going through while this possession is happening, right? And that arc is kind of played out throughout the entire movie. And with this, I didn't get that. I just got a whole bunch of characters that were kind of more annoying than anything else. Um, but we can start delving into spoilers. So
Yeah.
just letting you guys know, we are going into full-fledged spoiler territory. So if you want to fast forward this or you know, maybe save this for a later time, do so. Spoilers start now.
Go
And my
in, Gabe.
first spoiler, my the two biggest things, my wife and I looked at each other in the movie. The freaking gas coming, whatever the hell it was. I don't know what it was. The green CGI smoke, which is it was atrocious. I'm like, this is stupid. I'm like, is this the Haunting of Connecticut? What the hell's going on? I I didn't expect any major CGI from this movie because I thought that they would try to play from the Exorcist as much as possible to, you know, use as many practical effects as you can. But they went full CGI with this like weird smoke stuff. And then you have the priest coming in, which is supposed to kind of, you know, save the day, almost kind of like this Avengers portals thing. Like, hey, I'm coming in. We're gonna, we're gonna do this. And then his neck just like snaps like within like 3 seconds. I'm like, what is going on with this movie? And my wife and I just stared at each other and we almost like giggled, which is not something you want from a horror film, but let alone a direct sequel to The Exorcist. And also I guess the last spoiler that really frustrated me is this whole deal with the devil at the end with, you know, you have to choose one of these girls to survive, and it's like which makes you the parents for the other girl already hated. I thought they were obnoxious, and then the dad comes in last minute like, I choose my daughter, and you're just like, you fucking moron. Like you just see it from a mile away. I'm like, your daughter's gonna die now. Like you made a deal with the devil literally, and it doesn't go anywhere, and you don't even get to process at the end. I was kind of curious. I'm like, shit, how do her parents feel now? You see him sitting at a diner, and then the mom kind of approaching him, but you don't get any resolution to
Mm.
see kind of like how it impacted them, how no, it's like okay, this happened and let's keep going with the story. It was just so convoluted, so freaking convoluted. I didn't care about any of these characters whatsoever. And I will give it what Will said. I think the opening was solid though. I think the opening in Haiti with, you know, the mom getting the blessing and the earthquake, I think that there was a lot of emotional impact there. It set up a good foundation for the rest of the movie. But as soon as the possession stuff happens, it's like you're watching a completely different movie. I think you could literally take the first 20 minutes, you know, and compare it to the rest of the movie, and it's like, what the hell happened here? But yeah, God, man, I can go on for hours. I don't know if there were spoilers that you guys thought that, you know, that frustrated you, but those were the biggest ones for me. It's just these characters that you don't give any shits about.
Yeah. Like, to piggyback, because the goofiest aspect is the part that you're tuning in for, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
the exorcism. We've all talked about it. I thought I was in for a decent ride that first 30, 35 minutes, maybe 40. Um, I think they spent just as long on the part where it's like the search party, this and that. Like, I knew it was going to get goofy once the second the dad just starts going into Tanner, Leslie Odom's character, like
Mm-hmm.
the other girl's parents. Just like you said,
Yeah.
I did not like him. When he kicked over the trash can, I was like, I hope I never see this guy on screen again. Every time he comes
Yeah.
on screen, it's just going to be absolutely miserable. And that's what we got, you know? And then and I don't think we actually even talked about this yet. But whenever I want to say maybe it was the actual hospital, maybe it might have been the psych ward at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
the mom of not Tanner's daughter, God, this movie is so forgettable. I can't remember character's name except Leslie Odom's character. So
Yeah.
when they're out there, they're just like, he's out here just trying to talk about, like, again, it's kind of goofy. He's like, you know, might need psych help, stuff like this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, is it not obvious? She's possessed by the devil. What the hell? What? That just comes out of left field, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no signs, there's none of this, there's no build up to that, like there was
Mm-hmm.
in the original, which there is a cadence and flow. Like, again, we keep saying we are not expecting it to be the original, but the original is a great footprint if you're going to call yourself a direct sequel.
Yeah.
So to just come out there, it reminds me, to get a little bit off left field, of the Omen 4. If you've seen the Omen 4, she hits somebody with a lunchbox. The principal pulls her in
Yeah.
there, tells the parents, I think she's possessed, or I think she's like the son of Lucifer. What? All she did was hit somebody with a lunchbox. That's how
Yeah.
goofy it was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And So that came out of left field. And I think, Will, it's what you said about jump scares. That's been my biggest complaint. The original never relied on jump scares. Did it have some parts where it just like, the creaks in the walls and stuff like that during the last
Sure.
part where I think I said that it almost felt like a new movie with the Atmos track and the 4K because it gave me like, whoa, that got loud suddenly. But that's a part of that. Like I'm not supposed to just get, scared by a crack in the wall. It just got me. But whenever they're talking through the glass and then she just hits it,
Mhm.
pisses me off when things do that because it got me because I saw it in the Dolby Cinema. So it has like the subs underneath the seat and behind you. So it felt like,
Mhm.
like that whenever everybody's talking relatively quiet. It just absolutely pissed me off. All the Reagan stuff really felt like it was shoehorned in. The Ellen Burstyn
Oh, I
stuff,
forgot about that stuff.
yeah, like it felt shoehorned in. Like, if this isn't Pazuzu, why are they talking about Reagan? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I get Ellen Burstyn's there and stuff like that, but he
Yeah.
also,
Why are you itching her name in the
yeah,
wood?
like this hiding underneath there because like they were creepy. The
Mhm.
girls while they were possessed and the scenes that they were in there, it was creepy.
Yeah.
There was some solid stuff in there in that aspect. And then to piggyback a little bit more, like the Doctor Strange portal ass thing with the
The
father, the priest,
Yeah.
like he comes out of nowhere whenever he goes to approach, like I forget exactly what the verbiage is whenever you go to a council and ask for an exorcism and the
Yeah.
nurse
Mhm.
is with him and then he's like, I've been watching these girls, this and that. Bro, where have you been? You haven't been in the
Right.
rest of the movie. Your first appearance was sitting in the waiting room for maybe 10 15 seconds of screen
Mhm.
time just to exist. And like it's called The Exorcist because the original focused on the priest, his struggle with faith, as we've said
Mhm.
many times before. So it wasn't an exorcist movie because there was no exorcist. So
Exactly.
whenever he comes in and then Tanner, Leslie Odom's character, comes out, I actually did like that scene. He's like, hey, the fight's in there, not in here.
Mhm.
I thought that was a pretty decent scene, even though it was could have been executed better. I liked it. It was emotional, it was impactful. Bro, we need your help.
I like that line a lot. It was a
Mhm.
good line, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just needed to be built up around not Tanner, Leslie Odom's character. It needed to be built around the father more,
Mhm.
the priest. And God, we can go on about how dumb the smoke out of the mouth was because it's not the fact that the smoke comes out. It's what they, I believe it was
What they call it?
yeah. So they're like, so I believe it was the spiritual lady.
They're erupting. They're
Yeah,
They're
erupting.
they're
erupting.
erupting. The fuck? Are they possessed by a volcano? What do you mean they're erupting? What where is this coming? Are
Yeah.
they just
Like
gonna
where's
burst?
yeah. And the
Yeah,
fireplace did something. I don't know. She fucking lit the fireplace and the smoke. Like
the
what
sage.
was that? Like
It-
yeah.
it-
Like what is this? What are we watching?
yeah, like that I get, like, because apparently, like, sage is like a spiritual thing that neutralizes bad
Sure.
energy and omens, and like that I
Yeah.
got. But what the fuck is she erupting from? Ectoplasm? You know, like, what is it? And yeah, we can't talk enough about how the priest just comes in there and then just like, I'm here to save the day.
Yeah.
It's just so sudden. The father coming in there saying, I choose you, like as if it's a Pokemon, like it just makes no sense. The legacy characters, I can go on and on about how horribly utilized. Not all. I'm not going to categorize everything. Sometimes it's done justice. Sometimes it pays homage. Again, we're in full on spoilers. The way Linda Blair was handled, the way that Ellen Burstyn was handled, and their characters with Reagan and McField. That's their last name, right?
McNeil.
McNeil. Yep, you're right. So like
Mhm.
the way that was not wanting to,
McNeil. Yeah.
yeah, not wanting anything to do off of a book.
Yeah, that
Um,
pissed me off, dude. I was like, that's why you're not talking to your mom because she wrote a book. And
yeah,
I get that, but I get it to a certain extent, right? Where it's like, okay, that maybe might piss you off. That was my personal experience, but your mom's like in her 90s right now.
no,
Like,
exactly. Like
how much time do you have left with your mom, and you're not going to talk to her?
exactly, and like so the aspect, I made a joke off camera about this. Like I feel like the only reason whenever Ellen Burstyn went up there and then not Tanner's daughter, the other family's daughter, whenever she's possessed and stabs her eyes out with the cross, they only did that so that she has no possibility of reading the script for this second movie. Like it just makes no sense. It makes zero sense. Like I'm tired of legacy characters being violated for the sake of, oh my God, they did that. Because there is a
Yeah.
good way to do that and there is a bad way to do that.
It
It's
works when it's built up properly.
Sure.
exactly
When they take time to provide you with the buildup, they can do it right. That we're not saying that we don't like. It's not that we. Well, yeah, I mean, we do care how they execute it, but it's not that she got her eyes stabbed out by I think it was Catherine, the girl's name.
yep
Hmm.
It's that there was no buildup to it. We don't care about what's happening. So in this case, regarding this movie, it's just a wasted opportunity. It's
agreed.
just ridiculous and funny and just off the wall. I mean, that's how it comes across. It's not thought out at all. They just thought, okay, let's throw this in there to fucking shock people. Except it doesn't work because we don't care about what's happening.
At
Yeah,
all.
it's just goofy. And then what am I supposed to like? Whenever the happiest part is when the credits roll, is right before that. I'm supposed to get up and cheer when Linda Blair just comes in. Mother, I'm here. I forget exactly what she says, but like
Mm.
Oh
that
yeah.
is the goofiest cameo. I think they should have left it to being like an image on there. And if they really do have these next two planned, which there's no way they spent $400 million on these rights. There's no way the second and third one's going to go out. Which I'm going to pose a
Mm.
question to you guys after. Will you give your take? But
Yeah.
I don't see any possibility of the next two overriding the tragedies of this first one, because this is the
Mm.
first one. It's different than again, it's the same director, same team, so we're going to be bringing it up. Whenever it comes to the Halloween trilogy, it started off strong and then it's a mixed bag depending on who you talk to. I like the next two after that. I think it's a decent trilogy at the least, but I don't see any way whenever this is your whole buildup of counteracting the missteps in this one. Like you
Mm.
did so much wrong and didn't explain so much. It's going to kind of be a Star Wars type of situation where you're going to have so many people possibly trying to overwrite what somebody else set as a precedence
Yeah.
just to constantly retroact everything that has gotten said. And then you're going to spend all this
Hmm.
time off of all of our complaints, spending the second movie to the point where now you have another Exorcist movie that's not even going to remotely do much except
Hmm.
just be exposition. So
Yep.
that's mine. That's my soap opera.
It this situation could play out, and I'm going to reference Halloween, but I'm going to go back to the late '80s, early '90s. This could play out similar to how the Halloween franchise played out with Halloween 5.
Yeah.
Whereas Halloween 5 set up so many crazy things and was such a bad movie, and the script was so off the wall and ridiculous that when they were doing 6, they're like, all right, well, how do we patch this up? Like it could play out the same way, and
Hmm.
Halloween 6 became known for that, and that's why it is what it is, and it has the problems it has because it's like once you open up the floodgates, it's hard to go back, and Halloween 2018 was a solid movie. Not everybody liked it, but critically, it was well received,
Yep.
and overall audiences enjoyed it. So for David Gordon Green and co. and Blumhouse, it was a solid opening.
Hmm.
Right? Whereas with this, like, they fumbled right out of the gate. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, how do you take the ball and run from here? Because now you got to figure out how to correct all these mistakes, and David Gordon Green's been pretty transparent about his creative process. He was very open and forthcoming about what he learned after 2018 Halloween was released. He took notes, he
Hmm.
listened to audience feedback, he listened to the fans. um, there's situations where you do that too much, you can also lose focus of what you're trying to do.
Hmm.
But I do respect him for coming forward and saying, okay, we're going to do a few things different with kills. With this movie, I don't know how they even move forward with this. Unless they get another creative team in here to fix this. I mean,
Yeah.
it was that much of a ball drop.
I think it's going to turn into, I think one of you guys used the Star Wars analogy, which is like a perfect analogy for what's going on here. I think that,
Yeah.
you had Force Awakens, and then I think it was the Last Jedi that like pretty much split everything, right? Where it's like you brought
Yep.
Ryan Johnson in, and I think the reason that that trilogy failed is you didn't have a set story from the get-go. You didn't have
Hmm.
like an idea from the get-go that you could stick with, and then everything with the third installment was just fixing all the mistakes from the other ones and kind of catering to what fans wanted. But I mean, you kind of did it too late. You know what I mean? It's like the plot's not making sense anymore, and I think that could potentially happen with this one. I don't know if they brought in a new team. I I don't know, because I'm so discouraged right now. I'm like, I don't know if you could do it, but I want to say if you brought in a new team that could maybe take, we talked about like the A24 approach, right? Like what would that look like? You know, it wouldn't be A24 obviously, but if you brought in a new team who maybe could kind of look at it from that perspective and say, okay, you know what, let's focus more on just making an intricate story, like and that's it. I think they could maybe do something, but I would need to see a different writer. I would need to see a different director. I don't have any animosity towards David Gordon Green. I think he just had a vision of what he thought this movie would be. And I've heard him talk about it in interviews where he thought, you know, bringing this kind of sociological aspect into it, where you're analyzing, you know, faith, religion, different religions, you know, different value systems within a community. I think he had an honest, genuine passion to make a good movie. It just, that vision just didn't translate well in terms of execution. So I think that they could maybe salvage it. I think that you need to bring in a whole new team, and you need to from the get-go say, okay, this is where we're taking the story, and this is where the third installment's going to. We need to brainstorm all of this right now. You can't just make part two and then see how it does, and then, you know, come up with a story after that's done. I think you really need to brainstorm the entire story from the get-go. And I'm trying to think, I don't know, do you guys have any idea of who you'd want working on a sequel to Deceiver? I know we're probably going to get David Gordon Green again. I'm not hopeful that, you know, I'm not too hopeful that they're actually going to change the director and the creative team. But I mean, I don't know who could maybe handle this in terms of
Yeah.
directors or writers.
I don't know, because I mean, you can't necessarily go with too big of a name, right? Because then the
Hmm.
expectations out the get go get, kind of overblown.
Yeah.
Of course, this would never happen. But let's say they announced John Carpenter is going to make an Exorcist movie, right?
Hmm.
My God, like some of his later stuff. As much as I appreciate that he still makes some movies every now and then, or did quite a while ago, it doesn't mean that they're always good. Kind of the same thing with
Yeah.
Tobe
Yeah.
Hooper's filmography as you get later on and stuff. He has some good ones, but there are a
Hmm.
lot of misses. I forget the name of him, but if you want a really good drama, Scott Derrickson. He did Emily
Yeah.
Rose. That would be probably the best name, but that's still a big name. He did Doctor Strange. He did Sinister. He did Emily Rose. He's done quite a few very successful movies that I don't think anybody strongly dislikes really any of his filmography. But I also forget the name of the person that did the last Exorcism. That would be a solid approach, a fresh mind.
Hmm.
He also did Pray for the Devil, which that movie was awful, but had some good ideas though, but not like this, like that movie. As much as I disliked that one because it was essentially like X-Men Exorcists,
Hmm.
but he had some ideas that could have just been executed better with a better budget, with a little bit more of a push. With the budget of this, Scott Derrickson, oh my God, if he was given $30 million to make an Exorcist movie,
Hmm.
Emily Rose isn't terrifying, but it builds such an
But it was
engrossing
new.
drama. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd never had something like that. I love that movie, and I don't think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I have the DVD. I don't think there's a Blu-ray for it yet. Maybe there is. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, I have the DVD still. Like that movie to me stood out because you have this like Exorcist story, which is, I mean, the scenes are creepy as hell, but then you have this compelling courtroom drama that's like intertwined with it. And it was so different at the time, where you're examining a lot of the themes that we're talking about. You know, like, you know, faith, science, religion, the legality of something like this. You know what I mean? Like, you know, an exorcism when someone's not, you know, mentally or physically, you know, capable of going through it. Like, how does that play out? It was such a engrossing movie. I would love to see him direct an Exorcist film. The name that was coming up for me um, was Mike Flanagan. I know he did a lot of The Haunting of Hill House. I think he
Mm.
did Ouija. I forgot which one he did. I think it was like the beginning or something like the prequel to the Ouija movie. He's taken a lot of material from like you know, books and stuff like that and translated it for TV series. But he's just a good filmmaker. I think he really does well with like character development and fleshing out a good story, um and keeping something really contained and really like tight knit. Like you can have multiple stories going on, and he always ties up the bow perfectly. So like Mike Flanagan, I think would be a freaking awesome choice to carry on and do an Exorcist movie with.
He's got a
Uh,
great track record too, Gabe. I think he
mhm.
did Doctor Sleep, didn't he? I love
Oh yeah,
Doctor
he
Sleep.
did.
He
Oh, I
did.
It's a
love
good
Doctor Sleep,
one.
man.
I haven't seen
Awesome,
that. I
awesome
need to
guy.
watch it.
Oh, dude, it's such a
Yeah.
good movie. He honestly knocked it out of the park. I think he it was a good blend of doing something new, like that you would not expect for a Shining sequel, but also keeping a lot of the same elements of the original into it. I think it's perfect with what we want with The Exorcist. That's what we wanted with this installment, right? We wanted that kind of like pay homage to the original, but give us something new at the same time. And I think if his name was announced for it, I'd be my excitement would creep back up again. I'd have a little bit more hope, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
I hope. I mean, by the way, Emily Rose is on Blu-ray and it's on sale for $9
Is
on
it?
Amazon.
Oh
So
shit!
yeah, I know you're about to open up a new tab and
Yep, let's go.
Order that shit.
yeah, it's just such a slippery slope. I mean, Exorcist 3, I think, is one of those underrated sequels. I think it's solid. It's a solid drama. It's got great
Yeah.
atmosphere to it. I also like George C. Scott a lot. A lot. I think he carries any movie he's in. He's great, Patton and stuff like that. But to come full circle to this guy with Exorcist Believer, it's just there have been so many misses that where people
Yeah.
haven't even gotten close. You've had people that have just made their own Exorcist movies or exorcism movies that could be just as much of an homage to the original without having that title.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
by
this
doing
felt
things
like
differently.
it could be any other possession film. It didn't stand out, and that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the problem. Like, and you guys touched on this earlier. When you announce that you're doing a direct sequel and you're gonna omit everything that came, like you're gonna forget about Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which
It's fine.
for good reason. But I don't know. I might watch that again after seeing this and compare the two and see if there's anything about that movie that's redeeming, but probably not. But I mean, Exorcist 3 is a solid follow up. I think if they took notes from that, not necessarily obviously including Exorcist 3 in this timeline, but taking pacing notes, atmosphere in particular. Like those are two things that you said, Chase, that movie did perfectly. Exorcist 3 is underrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually doesn't have that good of a rating on Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic, but that's a very solid follow-up. Psychologically, it's fantastic. The writing is very on point. Again, pacing and atmosphere is everything. I don't think this movie had that. I have a few other spoilery things I want to get into, but I want to let you finish, Chase, on your thoughts before I go on. But yeah, I just felt they could have taken that blueprint and applied it much better to this movie.
No, go right on ahead, man. I pretty much off my soap opera. I can just keep complaining about the
Yeah.
eruption.
For
It's the
hours.
lamest line in a movie I've seen in a while, and I watched The Nun 2.
Yeah.
Damn.
I watched The Nun 2, and that's one of the lamest line deliveries I've seen. But that's pretty much my soap opera. I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Will.
Yeah, I mean, for spoilers, I mean, the way in which the girls were possessed, I didn't quite understand why they had to show too much of that. I get it. They were in the forest, like, performing some kind of ritual with the candles and swinging the pendant back and forth. I think it had something to do with, like, hypnotizing themselves and trying to cross over into that other realm to communicate with the dead mother, who obviously we know what happens to her. She dies in Haiti in the earthquake in the beginning of the movie. So there's that whole thing there. I just felt that they didn't need to show as much of that. It was one of those things where it's like, all right, here we go. Like the
Mm-hmm.
original movie, why it was so unsettling is that it's the subtlety of it, right? Where Chris McNeil, Ellen Burstyn's character, she finds the Ouija board, after the fact that
Mm-hmm.
that gateway or that portal to hell or that communication with the evil spirit, Pazuzu, the demon, that's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
That bridge has already been built. It's already taken place, right? So it's so much more effective because once we see that, that's such a visual cue. Like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
she's already fucked. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
already going to go down that road, and we see it very slowly build and progress to the point where we see physically how Reagan's character changes, right? From a beautiful, young, innocent, healthy girl to this monster, right? This monstrosity that she's just horrid to even look at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kudos to the special effects and special makeup effects for that original movie because to this
Yeah.
day it still holds up, right?
Oh yeah.
I felt that the practical effects in this movie were decent. The girls look great. Like when they were in their final possessed forms, so to speak, the makeup was great. The eyes, they nailed that. I just felt that we didn't really get that slow progression that we got with the original movie. And so you kind of see them as like regular girls, and then they go into the woods, they disappear for the 3 days that they're gone, and then they come back, and you see some parts of that or some elements of that. But again, it falls in line with what we were saying earlier, that everything feels fragmented, everything feels thrown together and just kind of presented to us. I said in my letterbox review, there's no cinematic weight or gravitas behind any of this. It just feels kind of put in front of you, and it's just like, okay, here we go. You know, this is happening. And there's really nothing to take away from it.
Mhm.
But the possession scene, I felt, or the initial contact, so to speak, with the demon, I felt like they didn't need to show that, you know. And then the whole exorcism scene, we can get into that. I hated the fact that Ann Dowd, who I love, she's a great actress,
Mhm.
the fact that her character was just like, you know, she has a quick conversation with a priest who's been, you know, involved with this for years, and he just kind of passes the mantle on to her. And there's that whole like cringy scene where they're outside, out back in back of the house, and she looks at everybody. She's like, "I can do this. You
Yeah.
know, I've been blessed." I said, "No, you can't, bitch. You can't fucking do this." Like, and you kind of get that idea that no one knows what the hell they're doing.
Mhm.
You know, they open this movie up so much. They throw in all these characters. The exorcism scene was so hectic. There were so many people involved. I'm losing track of who's who. You know, I forget that you had, I think it's one of the other neighbors. I forget who he is. You guys
Oh,
can maybe
yeah.
help me out here. The guy with the glasses who like introduces like the witch doctor.
Yeah, like, so
I don't,
random.
I forgot who that guy was. It one of the neighbors? 'Cause I think he's like
Yeah, it
his
was his
gym buddy.
neighbor, yeah, and then that was creepy too, right? Because he like I remember he came home and his door was open,
Yeah, he's
and he
just
Yeah.
sitting
just,
on the
like,
bed.
has these, like,
And
witch
they're just
doctors in
in
his
his
daughter's
house.
room.
And he
Like,
just
what
kinda
the
he's like, "You
fuck?
guys need to leave." I'd be like, "Dude, I'd be way more pissed at this fucking
Yeah, I'd
dude
be like,
than
"What the
than
f
than
why did you get into
like,
my
what are you
house?"
breaking and entering and just fucking throwing, like, sage and shit in my house?" It's like, "What the
Yeah, I'm
hell
like,
is
"Dude,
this?"
you're a fucking creep. Get the fuck away from me."
But, you know, and then the exorcism scene, as you guys said, it's just the whole thing with, like, the haunting to Connecticut. I don't know what they were doing there. That was just not that whole thing did not need to be included in this. And that's what made the original so special, is that they relied on practical effects to really
Mhm,
drive home the point, you know? And for the fact that they had to throw VFX in there and go that route was for me, and I'm a big effects guy. Obviously, you guys know
mhm,
I'll take practical effects over anything VFX any
100%.
day. Not that VFX doesn't have its place. We love our VFX artists, you know,
Mhm,
we support them. But it's just, again, that over reliance on something that wasn't even needed in the first place. And
yeah.
that's what makes it even more confusing. It's just head scratching. Like, why was this included? Like, what was the point of this?
And that could have
It
been the
just felt,
studio interference that you referenced earlier, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Maybe they
well,
wanted, like, "Hey, build this up, make it more,
yeah,
expansive in some way," and
yeah.
it just leads to, less of an impact.
When I made the joke about, you know, David Gordon Green not having complete control in like in a situation where a studio comes in and says, okay, well, you know, statistics show that we need this, we need, you know, we need 11 jump scares, we need to have this in there, we need, and I question how much of that happened with this, because it
Mhm,
just feels like it was something with good intentions, but there were too many hands in the pot, and the end result is something that's pretty much just like a corporate kind of mess of a project, you know. And I want to touch on like the violence and the blood and gore or lack thereof, because there
mhm.
really wasn't much in this movie. Now I'll say this, it's important to note here that the original film didn't have a lot of blood and gore either. You know, it
Yep.
had, you know, the infamous scene where she's stabbing herself with the crucifix. Yes, that's shocking, but the reason why that's so effective is because you have the character work and the story,
Mhm.
you know, to build up to that.
You
You're
care.
invested and you care about what's going on, you
Mhm,
know? And the original film takes its time to develop that relationship with Chris McNeil and Reagan, and also Father Karras. You know, we know what he's going through. And what's so great about that movie is that they're kind of on these paths. They're kind of dealing with these struggles, right?
mhm,
With Chris McNeil, it's a struggle with, you know, losing her daughter, you know, the potential that she's going to lose her daughter forever to whatever force is overtaking
mhm,
her. And with Father Karras, his fear is that he wasn't there for his mom and that he's going to lose her forever,
mhm.
and live with the regret, and he's battling with that, right? And they're kind of on these paths, and their paths they cross, right?
Yep.
Like fate brings them together.
Mhm,
And that's what's so interesting about that film. And it's a perfect way, it's a perfect example of a story where you can focus on more than one character and have their paths cross in a meaningful way. Whereas with this movie, yeah, I think from the get-go, they set out to do that by trying to bring all these people together, but again, you open it up too much, and suddenly you lose track of what you're trying to do in the first place, because now it's like, "Okay, well, now we gotta follow up on this, we gotta tie this person in,"
It's
and
forced.
it's
Like
forced, and there's
it's
too much
totally
to work
forced.
with,
Yeah, and I
you
think
know,
that
and
just what you said was beautiful. Like where it's just like you have these people on kind of going through congruent paths, right? And then they just kind of like naturally converge, right? And
Mhm.
it's so well done. And in this one, it's like it's so freaking forced. It's like just throw everyone in
Yeah.
the same room and and let's see what happens. And it's like no,
See who
dude, like what
erupts.
are you doing?
Yeah, see who erupts.
See who
But they
erupts.
tried to up the ante, but they didn't up the ante because that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. There's no build up to anything, and then there's really I don't think there's a vomit scene. We've talked about this before. I think there's one scene where
There
She
is.
somebody
spit
let
at Anne, the
spit
nurse,
Pea
or whatever.
soup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, honestly, the most violent scene in this movie was when, Chris McNeil gets her eyes stabbed out with the crucifix, and
and
that
there's
was
no
just
emotional impact with that either. I was kind of like,
I
well,
rolled my eyes. I was like,
yeah, I'm like, it's supposed to be this intense scene, it's a legacy character, whatever. But I
Mhm.
was just like, really? Like, that's what you guys did? You stabbed her in the fucking face? Like,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
But
And
there's a reason why that grotesqueness of the first
hmm
movie, that's impactful, like, when you see what's happening to Reagan physically, the stabbing with the
hmm
crucifix, the vomit, like, the scars and the
hmm
cuts all over her, and the head turning, and then in the director's cut, the spider walk, which isn't
Spider
in the
walk.
theatrical,
Yeah.
but and some people feel that the spider walk doesn't need to be included, that it doesn't serve the story, but it's another one of those scenes where it sends that message home that, like, God, like,
Something's
possession is
going
a
on.
terrifying thing, and, like,
hmm
these things can't normally happen to a human being.
hmm
They had none of that in this movie. So there's really nothing, there's no shock factor or anything that really drives home the point of holy shit, that's disgusting. Like, yeah, I can tell that there's a demon inside of this person because a demon would force somebody to do this, right?
Yeah.
The
And
only
it's
scene we really get like that is the scene I mentioned with Ellen Burstyn.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to say is just the ending. I think that the original, it wrapped up really nice. Like you guys have heard me say a lot of times, I'm very picky with horror movies and the way they end, but I feel The Exorcist is like the perfect blend of like a bittersweet ending. And that's typically what I want in a horror film, right? It's never going to play out perfectly. Father Karras dies. Like that
Yeah.
sucks. But I mean, Reagan survives, you know what I mean? And the family's going to, they're traumatized, but they're going to kind of push forward from it. And that's what you get with the first one. And in this one, it's like, you're literally watching this little girl being dragged into hell.
Yeah.
A girl that's done nothing, but just she's literally getting dragged into hell. Odom's character gets his daughter back, and it's supposed to be it. Yeah, I don't understand like what they thought that ending would. I know they're trying to leave it open for Deceiver, but it just didn't work for me.
I felt bad for the girl, like Catherine, I think her name was, that ended up getting dragged to hell. Like,
Yeah,
there
dude,
was
I
like
felt like
part of
shit.
that kind of sucked, but I was like, really? Like, that's how this is what we're doing? And then you have the bit at the end where, again, Ann Dowd's characters, I think she's at the police station talking to the detective, and she brings up the whole like community aspect, and they're talking about how people move forward from this. That seemed like shoehorned into me. It's like, okay,
hmm
here's like the preachy thing where it's like we talk about community and how evil affects, groups of people or whatever it is. Which again, we've heard this before with,
hmm
Halloween Kills and the whole mob mentality and how evil can overtake a community and
Yeah.
how it can affect the community. So again, I feel like they're taking a lot of aspects and a lot of tropes and things that they've done with those Halloween movies and just assuming they can kind of apply similar themes to this and just hope that it works. But it's not so far, at least
No,
with this entry. So
it's not.
yeah, just
Complete copy and
overall,
paste.
yeah, just very underwhelming for me. I don't know what you guys want to give it. I mean, I gave this a star and a half on my letterbox, so that's probably
I
like a
think
three
we
out of 10.
honestly all did that, and we didn't even talk to each other about it. Like we were kind of
yeah.
reserving our reviews. We knew we were all disappointed, but I think we all ended up giving it a star and a half, which equates to like a 3 out of 10, I guess.
And that's being
Yeah,
generous.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean it's really just Odom, right, and the girls. I think we all agree that they did a good job, and I think outside of that, there's maybe the
Nothing.
intro, and that's it.
Yeah. Like I really could see where the direction not necessarily wanted to go, but could go. You know what I
hmm
mean? I could definitely see some things like give us the raw footage, man. We'll cut something decent
hmm
up and we'll let you re-release it theatrically. Like there has to be like some other stuff like you guys were talking about studio interference. There has to be more. I would not be surprised if there's a vouch for the Gordon Green cut, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Do I think it'll necessarily be better? No, because that movie's already 2 hours long. You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which is, I had somebody actually, there was a reviewer I was listening to. He's like, that's actually relatively short. Like, it was like an hour, 52 minutes. It's actually relatively short in comparison to what it could have been, right? It could have had an extra 20, 30 minutes because a lot of movies, especially drama, horror esque movies like this, tend to try to run around the 2 hour, 10, 15, 30 minute mark. And that's with extra cuts and everything like that. But it doesn't need to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
An hour 52, an hour 57 is already generous enough. Like you spent
Yeah.
45 minutes building up to nothing, then spent about another 15 minutes making me care about something that I do care about, but stopped caring about as the movie kept progressing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
The
then,
path is set forth already.
yeah,
Nothing. The scenes that they would add on really wouldn't impact the trajectory of what we got.
not at all.
And my last complaint before we sign off is just please. I know it's not going to happen. Film it on celluloid, please. Like to me, that's a big thing. It's like fucking replicate that atmosphere as much. And he did that a little bit with Halloween. I remember what was it, Kills? I think at the beginning. Like I don't think it was shot on film, but he used some
Oh,
form of
yeah.
Flashback. Yeah.
filter. Yeah, the flashback scene was kind of like at least he used like I think it was like a filter of some sort because I think it was shot digitally. But like he was like, let me replicate this to make it look kind of like the originals and the sequels. I'm like, dude, do that here. Like, please just give me some
Yeah.
kind of atmosphere that you can
Well, that's
replicate.
Yeah, and you wanna replicate that style somewhat. Again, we don't wanna copy, like, cookie cutter paste of the original
No.
movie, but what you said about Halloween Kills, Gabe, like, yeah, I believe that was filmed on digital, but the technology exists. Like, what they did with that in Halloween
Hmm.
Kills was the high point of that trilogy
Yep.
for me. They did an amazing job, but it's a testament that that can be done.
Hmm.
They have the ability to do that creatively, and make it look great, and yeah, we talked about this when the trailers came out, and although I kinda liked the trailer, like, it was okay. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love
Hmm.
it. It was passable, and I was forgiving. I had told you guys, the movie could be edited much differently. I know a lot of people didn't like the trailer. One of the big complaints I heard was it has that modern, generic, like, horror look to it, like the
Hmm.
generic horror movie vibe, right? With the
Yep.
editing and just the color or color
Hmm.
saturation or lack thereof, it just had that modern look to it, and that threw a lot of people off from the get-go,
Hmm.
right? So I can totally understand where you're coming from with that because, yeah, when it has that modern look, it doesn't fit the style of the story that they're trying to tell. I would have appreciated some kind of filter or any kind of effect to make it look a little more like just give it that classic look. Just
Yeah.
tie it together. Tone and atmosphere are everything,
A
right?
hundred
And
percent.
you can have a movie be horrible, but if you get your tone and atmosphere right, like that's what people said about Halloween Kills. Overall, a lot of people don't like that movie. But
Hmm.
if you ask a lot of people, 9 people out of 10 will tell you, well, the flashback scene was fucking banger, dude. Like,
Hmm.
we love that,
Yeah.
because it brought them back. It connected them to
Hmm.
that original film that they love so much. They had the opportunity to do that with this and obviously, chose not to do it. But yeah, the atmosphere is big for me. You guys know I talk about that a lot. Atmosphere for me like sells a movie.
Yeah.
And I can forgive a lot of stuff if they get the atmosphere right, especially in a movie like this. You need atmosphere to help establish this kind of story. And the fact that this movie barely had any was just a letdown, overall for me.
Yep. And I don't think there's any more. Well, maybe we could probably go for hours shit talking on this movie, but I think that pretty much sums up what we thought about it. So, we appreciate you guys for listening as always. You guys have been awesome. Hearing us talk and and vent about different movies and giving us feedback. We appreciate all of that. You guys have been tremendously awesome. And just keep looking forward for good things to come. I think we're really trying to build up this podcast and see where else we can go with it. So we appreciate you guys a lot, and we will see you on the next one.
See you on the next one, guys.
Later.